The colony ship Eternal Wanderer had been traveling through deep space for 300 years. Inside its massive metal walls, 12,000 humans slept in frozen chambers, dreaming of a new home far from the dying Earth they had left behind. The ship's computer guided them through the endless darkness, following a path toward a distant star system that old telescopes had promised might hold life. But space is vast and full of dangers that no telescope can see. The ship passed through an invisible boundary one quiet morning. There were no alarms. There was no warning. The Eternal Wanderer simply crossed from empty space into territory that belonged to the Vexari Dominion, a massive empire that stretched across 400 star systems. The Vexari had ruled this region of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had conquered dozens of species. They had built cities on countless worlds, and they had never seen anything quite like the strange metal vessel that now drifted into their space. A Vexari patrol ship detected the Eternal Wanderer within hours. Commander Thalos stood on his bridge and studied the images on his screen. The alien vessel was enormous, larger than most Vexari warships. Its design was crude and primitive, with none of the elegant curves that marked Vexari engineering. Thalos could see sections of the hull that showed damage from asteroid impacts and cosmic radiation. This ship had traveled a very long way. "Scan it," Thalos ordered his crew. The results came back quickly. The ship carried no weapons that the scanners could identify. Its power systems were weak, barely strong enough to maintain life support and basic functions. Most interesting of all, the ship contained thousands of life forms in some kind of suspended state. "They are sleeping," said the science officer, a young female named Vera. "Their bodies have been frozen to prevent aging during long journeys. This is a technique that only primitive species use. Advanced civilizations use faster-than-light travel." Telos clicked his mandibles together, a sign of amusement among the Vex. "So they crawled across the stars like insects, spending centuries to travel distances that we cover in days. Pathetic." He ordered his ship to approach the Eternal Wanderer. The Vexari vessel was smaller but far more advanced. Its weapons could have destroyed the human ship in seconds. But Thalos was curious. New species were valuable to the Dominion. They could be studied, enslaved, or used as workers in the great mines and factories that powered the Empire. "Send a boarding team," Thalos commanded. "Wake a few of them up. I want to see what these creatures are." The Vexari soldiers entered the human ship through an airlock. They moved through the dark corridors with their weapons ready, though they expected no resistance. The ship's interior was cold and silent. Frost covered the walls in some sections. The air smelled stale, recycled countless times over centuries of travel. They found the sleeping chambers easily. Row after row of transparent pods filled enormous rooms. Inside each pod, a human floated in blue gel, their faces peaceful, their bodies still. The Vexari soldiers had never seen anything like them before. These creatures had no scales, no shells, no natural armor of any kind. Their skin looked soft and fragile. They had only 4 limbs, 2 for walking, and to that ended in strange flexible digits. "They look weak," said one soldier, "like the Kellery we conquered 50 years ago. They will make good servants." The team leader selected 5 pods at random and activated the revival sequence. The machines hummed to life. Slowly, the gel drained away. The bodies inside began to move. Eyes opened, lungs filled with air for the first time in centuries. Captain Maya Chen was the first to fully wake. She gasped and coughed, her body struggling to remember how to function after 300 years of sleep. Her mind was foggy, filled with fragments of dreams and distant memories. She remembered Earth, remembered the launch, remembered the faces of people she would never see again. Then she saw the alien standing in front of her pod. The creature was tall, nearly 8 feet, with a body covered in hard green plates. It had 4 arms and a head that resembled an insect, with large compound eyes and mandibles that clicked together as it spoke in a language she could not understand. Maya's training took over. She had been chosen as captain because of her ability to remain calm in any situation. She did not scream. She did not panic. She simply looked at the alien and waited. "Can you understand me?" the alien asked. A small device on its chest translated the words into rough English. "You have entered Vexari territory. Your vessel now belongs to the Dominion. Your people now belong to the Dominion. You will cooperate, or you will suffer." Maya looked at the other humans who were waking up around her. She recognized Dr. Samuel Okoye, the ship's chief scientist. She saw Lieutenant James Wheeler, one of her security officers. 2 others were civilians, a woman and a man whose names she could not immediately recall. "Where are we?" Maya asked. Her voice was hoarse from centuries of disuse. "You are in the outer reaches of the Vexari Dominion," the alien replied. "You are very far from wherever you came from. There is no escape. There is no rescue. You will accept your new place in our society." Maya noticed that the alien soldiers were watching her carefully. They held their weapons loosely, as if they did not expect any trouble. They looked at the humans the way a farmer might look at livestock, with a mixture of curiosity and indifference. She also noticed that James Wheeler was watching the aliens just as carefully. His eyes moved from soldier to soldier, counting them, measuring distances, calculating odds. Maya gave him a small shake of her head. "Not yet. We need time to adjust," Maya said to the alien leader. Our bodies are weak from the long sleep. We cannot serve anyone in this condition." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Of course, we are not cruel. You will be given food and rest before you begin your new lives. But do not think of causing trouble. Your primitive ship has no weapons. Your weak bodies have no armor. You are nothing compared to the might of the Vexery." Maya said nothing. She simply nodded and allowed the aliens to lead her and the other awakened humans out of the sleeping chamber. As she walked through the corridors of her own ship, surrounded by armed aliens who thought they had already won, she began to think about everything the Vexery did not know about humans. They did not know about human history, about the wars and struggles and impossible victories that had shaped her species. They did not know about human determination, about the stubborn refusal to accept defeat that lived in every human heart. They did not know that humans had survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that should have wiped them out. The Vexery saw soft skin and small bodies and assumed they saw weakness. They had no idea how wrong they were. The Vexery brought the 5 awakened humans to a holding cell on their patrol ship. The room was simple, with bare metal walls and a single hard bench that served as both seat and bed. A force field covered the doorway, buzzing softly with energy. The guards did not bother to watch them closely. They checked every few hours, glanced inside, and then walked away. To them, the humans were no more threatening than children. Maya Chen used this time wisely. She spoke quietly with her fellow crew members, learning what each of them could contribute. Dr. Samuel Okoye had studied alien biology for decades before the launch. He had theories about thousands of species that might exist in the universe, though he had never expected to meet any of them. Lieutenant James Wheeler had 20 years of military experience, including combat in 3 different wars on Earth. The 2 civilians were Anna Ruiz, an engineer who had designed parts of the Eternal Wanderer itself, and Marcus Cole, a psychologist who had been chosen to help colonists adjust to life on a new world. "They think we are primitive," Maya said. "They see our technology and assume we are weak. That gives us an advantage." "What kind of advantage?" Anna asked. "They have force fields and energy weapons. We have nothing. We have our minds," Maya replied. "We have 300 years of desperation, and we have something they clearly do not expect. We have the will to fight." Over the next several days, the humans observed their captors carefully. The Vexery soldiers followed strict routines. They ate at the same times, changed guards at the same times, and slept at the same times. They were efficient but predictable. More importantly, they were overconfident. None of them ever considered that the soft, weak creatures in the holding cell might be planning anything. Dr. Okoye made interesting discoveries by watching the Vexery biology. Their hard shell provided excellent protection, but it also limited their flexibility. They could not bend or twist the way humans could. Their compound eyes gave them wide vision, but they seemed to have trouble tracking fast movements. And their forearms, while useful for many tasks, moved slower than human arms. "They are built for strength, not speed," Okoye explained quietly. "In a fair fight, they would crush us. But if we could move fast enough, strike before they can react." Wheeler nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing. "I have been watching their weapons. The guards carry energy rifles, but they also have smaller weapons that they wear on belts around their waists. If we could get close enough to grab one." "We need to wait," Maya said. "We need more information. We need to know where we are being taken and what they plan to do with us. And we need to wake up more of our people." The Vexery patrol ship traveled for 2 more days before reaching its destination. Through small windows in the corridor, Maya caught glimpses of a massive space station orbiting a gray planet. The station was the size of a small moon, covered with towers and landing platforms and defensive weapons. Thousands of ships moved around it like insects around a hive. The humans were transferred to the station and placed in a larger holding area. Here they found other prisoners, members of species they had never seen before. There were small furry creatures with 6 legs who huddled in corners and trembled whenever a Vexery walked past. There were tall, thin beings with gray skin and large black eyes who sat in silence and stared at nothing. There were creatures that looked like walking plants, their bodies green and covered with leaves that had wilted in captivity. Marcus Cole spoke with some of these prisoners, using gestures and simple sounds to communicate. The stories he gathered were troubling. The Vexery had conquered all of these species. They used them as workers, as servants, as entertainment. Some species had been enslaved for thousands of years. They had forgotten how to fight. They had forgotten how to hope. They call the Vexery the Eternal Masters, Marcus reported to Maya. They believe that the Dominion cannot be defeated. They believe that resistance is impossible. Maya looked around the holding area at all the broken and defeated beings. She saw creatures who had surrendered not just their freedom but their spirit. The Vexery had crushed them so completely that they could not even imagine fighting back. "We are not like them," she said firmly. "Humans do not give up. Humans do not accept slavery. Our entire history is one long story of resistance against impossible odds." The Vexery commanders had plans for the humans. Researchers came to study them, taking blood samples and measuring their physical capabilities. They were disappointed by what they found. Humans were weaker than most species in the Dominion. They could not run as fast as the They could not lift as much as the They had no natural weapons, no claws or fangs or venom. Their only notable feature was unusual endurance, the ability to keep moving long after other species would have collapsed from exhaustion. They are average at best, one researcher concluded. They will make decent workers for light tasks, nothing more. The researchers did not bother to test human intelligence. They assumed that a species with such primitive technology could not be very smart. They did not notice the way Maya listened to every conversation, learning words of the Vexiri language. They did not see Anna studying the technology around her, figuring out how it worked. They did not observe Wheeler mentally mapping every corridor, every guard station, every possible escape route. After a week on the station, the Vexiri made a decision. They would wake up more humans from the Eternal Wanderer. The ship would be brought to the station, and the frozen colonists would be revived in groups of 100 at a time. They would be processed, evaluated, and assigned to different roles throughout the Dominion. The ship itself would be studied and then recycled for its raw materials. Maya heard this news from a careless guard who spoke openly in front of her, not knowing that she had learned enough of his language to understand. She kept her face blank and showed no reaction, but inside, her mind was racing. If they woke all 12,000 humans at once, the Vexiri would have enough workers to fill their needs. But they would also have 12,000 potential fighters, 12,000 people who had never accepted the idea that they were weak, 12,000 descendants of a species that had clawed its way from caves to the stars through sheer stubborn refusal to quit. That Vexiri thought they were adding slaves to their empire. They thought they were gaining property, resources, tools to be used and discarded. They were actually inviting an army into their home. That night, Maya gathered her small group in a corner of the holding area. She spoke in a whisper, making sure no Vexiri could hear. "They are going to wake our people," she said. "When they do, we need to be ready. We need to have a plan, and we need to find allies among the other prisoners here. The Vexiri have ruled this part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They have never been challenged because no one believes they can be beaten. We are going to change that." The other humans looked at her with a mixture of fear and determination. They knew the odds were against them. They knew that they faced an empire that had crushed countless species. But they also knew who they were. They were humans, and humans never went quietly. The awakening of the Eternal Wanderers colonists began 3 weeks after Maya and her small group had been captured. The Vexiri brought the human ship into a massive docking bay on the station. Teams of engineers swarmed over it, studying its strange design and primitive systems. They laughed at the technology they found: chemical rockets, solar panels, recycled air and water systems. It was like something from ancient history, but the humans inside the frozen pods were alive and healthy. The Vexiri revival teams worked efficiently, waking 100 humans at a time. Each group went through the same experience that Maya had faced. They opened their eyes expecting to see a new world, a new home, a fresh start for humanity. Instead, they found alien masters who told them they were now property of the Dominion. The reactions varied. Some humans wept, some screamed in anger, some simply stared in shocked silence. But Maya and her team were waiting for each new group. They pulled the confused colonists aside and spoke to them quickly, quietly, before the Vexiri could separate them. "Do not fight yet," Maya told them. "Do not show them what we can do. Play along. Pretend to be weak and scared. But remember who you are. Remember what we are, and be ready." The message spread through the growing human population like fire through dry grass. Within a month, 3,000 humans had been awakened. They were scattered across the station, assigned to various jobs. Some worked in kitchens, preparing food for Vexiri soldiers. Some cleaned corridors and living quarters. Some served in laboratories, performing simple tasks that the Vexiri considered beneath them. Everywhere they went, humans watched and learned. They memorized patrol routes. They studied technology. They discovered weaknesses. They made connections with other slave species, sharing whispers of hope in dark corners where no guards could hear. The other prisoners were confused by the humans at first. These new creatures were small and soft and had no obvious strengths. Yet they did not act like conquered beings. They did not lower their eyes when Vexiri passed. They did not tremble in fear. They moved through the station with a strange, quiet confidence that made other slaves uncomfortable. Zeth was a Kilari, one of the furry six-legged creatures that Maya had seen in the first holding area. He had been born on this station. His parents had been slaves, and their parents before them, going back 20 generations. He had never known freedom. He had never imagined it, but he had noticed the humans and they fascinated him. One day, Zeth watched a human woman lift a heavy container in a storage room. The container was meant for 2 workers, but she lifted it alone. Her arms shook with the effort, and sweat appeared on her face. A Vexiri guard stood nearby, bored and not really paying attention. The human woman could have asked for help. She could have complained that the task was too difficult. Instead, she gritted her teeth and kept lifting until the job was done. "Why did you do that?" Zeth asked her later, when they were alone. His translator device struggled with some human words, but they could understand each other well enough. The woman, whose name was Sarah, wiped sweat from her forehead and smiled. "Because I could. Because giving up was not an option." Zeth did not understand. In his world, you accepted your limits. You did not push against them. Fighting only brought pain. The Vexari are stronger than you, he said. Their weapons are more powerful. Their numbers are greater. How can you hope to resist? Sarah looked at him with eyes that held something Zeth had never seen before. It took him a moment to recognize it as hope. Let me tell you about my ancestors, she said. Thousands of years ago, humans lived in caves. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. The world was full of predators that could kill us easily. By every measure, we should have gone extinct, but we did not. We made tools. We made fire. We worked together. We fought back against creatures 10 times our size and won. We have never stopped fighting. It is in our blood. Zeth listened as Sarah told him stories of human history. She spoke of ancient battles where small forces defeated mighty empires. She described revolutions where oppressed people rose up against cruel masters. She shared tales of survival against diseases, disasters, and enemies that seemed unstoppable. We are not special because we are strong, Sarah concluded. We are special because we never accept defeat. No matter how bad things get, some part of us always believes we can win, and that belief makes us dangerous. Word of these conversations spread among the slave population. Other species began to look at the humans with new eyes. They saw the quiet determination in human faces. They noticed the way humans helped each other, shared food, protected their weak. They observed how humans never stopped studying their environment, always looking for opportunities. The Vexari noticed nothing. To them, the humans were just another batch of workers, a bit stubborn perhaps, occasionally slow to follow orders, but nothing unusual. The Empire had absorbed countless species over the millennia. These soft creatures from a distant star would be no different, but Commander Thalos, the one who had first captured the human ship, had begun to have doubts. He watched reports from the station with growing unease. Small things kept happening that did not fit the pattern of normal slave behavior. Tools went missing from workshops, only to reappear days later in different locations. Communication terminals showed brief unauthorized access that left no trace of what information had been viewed, and the humans seemed to be everywhere, always watching, always listening. They are planning something, Thalos told his superiors. I can feel it. We should separate them, send them to different systems across the Dominion. His superiors laughed at his concerns. You are being paranoid, Commander. They are primitives. Their ship had no weapons. Their bodies have no natural defenses. What could they possibly do? Thalos could not answer that question. He did not understand humans yet. He did not know about their history of rising from nothing to conquer their world. He did not know about their capacity for creative violence, for improvised weapons, for tactical thinking under pressure. He did not know that humans were the only species on their planet that had hunted every other creature to extinction or domestication. All he had was a feeling, a sense of wrongness, a predator's instinct that something dangerous was moving in the shadows. He was right, but by the time anyone listened to him, it would be far too late. In the deepest levels of the station, where maintenance tunnels ran like veins through metal walls, Maya Chen held a meeting. Around her stood representatives from 20 different slave species. They were terrified, but also curious. They had heard the whispers about the humans. They wanted to know if the rumors were true. Maya looked at each of them and spoke words that had not been spoken on this station in generations. The Vexari can be beaten. Their empire can fall. And we are going to show everyone how. The plan took 6 months to prepare. During that time, Maya's network grew from a handful of humans to thousands of allies across a dozen species. They called themselves the Free Minds. Though they never spoke this name aloud, every member knew only a small part of the larger strategy. This way, if anyone was captured and interrogated, they could not betray the whole operation. Ana Ruiz led the technical team. She had spent months studying Vexari technology, comparing it to human engineering. What she discovered surprised her. The Vexari systems were advanced but rigid. They followed strict protocols and established patterns. There was no creativity, no flexibility, no ability to adapt to unexpected situations. That Vexari had not faced a real challenge in so long that they had forgotten how to improvise. Their security systems are powerful, Anna explained to Maya, but they are designed to stop other They expect threats from organized military forces, not from slaves working together. They never imagined that their prisoners would become engineers, hackers, and saboteurs. Lieutenant Wheeler trained the fighters. He could not give them weapons yet, but he taught them other things. He showed them how to use their bodies as weapons, how to strike fast and disappear before the enemy could react. He explained how to turn everyday objects into tools of combat. A metal tray could become a shield. A cleaning solution could blind an enemy. A length of wire could disable a guard in seconds. Dr. Okoye studied Vexari biology in detail, looking for weaknesses. He found several. Their compound eyes were sensitive to certain frequencies of light. Their joints, hidden beneath their armor, were vulnerable to precisely targeted strikes, and their respiratory system, designed for their home world, struggled with certain atmospheric changes. Marcus Cole worked on the minds of their allies. Many slave species had been broken for so long that they could not imagine fighting. Marcus helped them remember that they had once been free. He showed them that fear was a choice, that courage could be learned, that hope was not foolish but necessary. The Vexery remained blind to all of this. They saw slaves going about their duties. They saw timid creatures following orders. They saw nothing that concerned them. On the day called Revolution Hour by later historians, everything changed. It began at exactly the same moment in 12 different locations across the station. Ina's team triggered a power surge that overwhelmed the main security grid. Lights flickered. Doors unlocked. The force fields that contained prisoners all across the station vanished in an instant. Commander Thalos was eating his evening meal when the alarms started screaming. He leaped from his seat and grabbed his weapon, his worst fears suddenly coming true. "Report," he shouted into his communicator. The responses were chaotic. Fights were breaking out everywhere. Slave species that had been docile for generations were attacking their masters with makeshift weapons. The humans were leading them, moving with a speed and coordination that seemed impossible. Wheeler led the assault on the main armory. His team of 50 humans faced 200 Vexery guards. The guards had superior weapons and armor. They had every advantage that should have mattered, but they had never fought an enemy that moved like the humans did. The humans came at them from angles they did not expect. They used the environment against them, creating smoke and confusion. They fought dirty, targeting joints and eyes and breathing apparatus. They did not follow any rules of combat that the Vexery understood, and they absolutely refused to stop, even when wounded, even when outnumbered, even when any sensible species would have surrendered. Within an hour, the armory was captured. Human and allied hands now held Vexery weapons. The balance of power had shifted. Across the station, similar scenes played out. Slave species who had never held weapons in their lives fought beside humans who taught them how. Kitchen workers attacked with knives and clubs. Maintenance crews used their tools to cut through walls and create new paths of attack. Communications officers sent false orders that threw the Vexery defense into chaos. Commander Thalos rallied what forces he could find and tried to organize a counterattack. But everywhere he turned, he faced resistance. The slaves knew the station better than any Vexery officer. They had spent years cleaning its corridors, maintaining its systems, learning every hidden corner. Now that knowledge became a weapon, how is this possible? Thalos demanded as another section of the station fell to the rebels. They are primitives. They have no military training, no weapons experience, no combat history. One of his officers, badly wounded and barely standing, gave him a grim answer. "We were wrong about them, Commander. The humans, they have been fighting their entire existence. War is in their nature. We just never bothered to look." Maya Chen led the assault on the command center. She moved through corridors filled with smoke and fire, stepping over fallen enemies and fallen friends. She had lost count of how many Vexeries she had fought. Her body was covered in cuts and bruises, but she kept moving. Stopping was not an option. The command center doors were sealed, but Anna had already prepared for this. A carefully placed explosive charge blew them open. Maya rushed inside with her team, weapons raised. The Vexery commander inside stared at her with his compound eyes. He had never seen a human up close before. This small, soft creature covered in blood and dirt was the leader of the rebellion that was tearing his station apart. He could not understand how this was possible. "You should have surrendered when you had the chance," Maya said. The commander raised his weapon, but Maya was faster. 3 shots from her captured rifle dropped him before he could fire. Around her, her team secured the room and began accessing the station's main systems. "This is Maya Chen to all rebel forces." She spoke into the station-wide communicator. "The command center is ours." "Repeat. The command center is ours. Continue the operation. Do not stop until every section is secure." Cheers echoed through the corridors as the message spread. Species that had been slaves for centuries were winning. The eternal masters were falling. The impossible was happening. The battle lasted 12 more hours. By the time it ended, the Vexery garrison on the station had been completely defeated. Thousands of them had been killed. The rest had surrendered or fled in escape pods. For the first time in 10,000 years, a Vexery installation had fallen to a slave rebellion. And this was only the beginning. Maya stood on the observation deck and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the rest of the Dominion waited, unaware of what had just happened. 400 star systems filled with Vexery forces, countless more slaves waiting to be freed. The odds were still impossible, but humans had never let impossible odds stop them before. News of the station's fall traveled across the Dominion like a shockwave. The Vexery High Council could not believe what they were hearing. A single station, captured by slaves, led by a species they had never even catalogued as a potential threat. It had to be a mistake, a failure of local leadership. Something that could be easily corrected. They sent a fleet to retake the station. 50 warships, carrying 20,000 elite soldiers, more than enough force to crush any rebellion. The fleet commander, Admiral Voxen, was one of the most decorated officers in Vexery history. He had conquered entire civilizations. A group of escaped slaves would fall before him in hours, but the humans had spent the weeks after their victory preparing for exactly this response. Anna Ruiz had learned the station's defense systems completely. Dr. Okoye had created weapons from the station's medical and chemical supplies. Wheeler had trained thousands of fighters from the liberated slave species, and Maya had sent secret messages to other Vexery installations, to other slaves who had heard rumors of the rebellion and dared to hope that when Admiral Voxen's fleet arrived, they expected to find a desperate group of rebels waiting to be destroyed. Instead, they found a fortress. The station's weapons systems, now fully operational under human control, opened fire before the Vexery ships could take position. Defense drones, reprogrammed by Ana's team, swarmed the fleet in patterns that Vexery pilots had never seen before. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, Admiral Voxen's flagship was a burning wreck, and the survivors of his fleet were fleeing in all directions. The Dominion had suffered its first major military defeat in over 2,000 years. This victory changed everything. Across the Dominion, slaves who had accepted their fate for generations began to whisper a new word: hope. Stories spread about the humans, these strange, soft creatures who had somehow done the impossible. They were called the Unbreakable Ones, the Starfighters, the Deathbringer. The Vexery tried to stop these stories, but they could not silence whispers in the dark. Rebellions erupted on 100 worlds. Most were crushed quickly, but each one distracted Vexery forces and drained their resources, and some succeeded, joining with the growing human-led alliance. The Free Minds were no longer just a name. They were a movement, a revolution spreading across the stars. Maya Chen understood that military victory alone would not be enough. The Dominion was too large, too powerful, to defeat through force. They needed to break the idea of Vexery invincibility. They needed to show every slave species in the galaxy that freedom was possible. She launched a campaign of what she called liberation strikes. Small teams of humans and allied fighters would sneak into Vexery systems, free slaves, and disappear before the authorities could respond. Each strike was carefully chosen for maximum symbolic impact. They freed the famous gladiator pits of Vexa Prime, where slaves fought to the death for Vexery entertainment. They destroyed the Monument of Eternal Dominion, a structure that had stood for 8,000 years as a symbol of Vexery power. They rescued the last surviving members of species the Vexery had nearly driven to extinction. With each strike, more species joined the cause. That Kellery, once the most broken of all slave races, became fierce warriors. Their 6 legs and small size made them perfect for infiltration missions. The gray-skinned Watchers, with their large black eyes, could see in complete darkness and became invaluable scouts. Even the plant-like Verdani contributed, their natural chemistry allowing them to create powerful medicines and useful toxins. The Vexery High Council finally recognized the threat they faced. They gathered the largest fleet in their history, over 500 warships, and sent it to destroy the rebel headquarters once and for all. This time, there would be no mistakes. This time, they would burn every human, every rebel, every trace of resistance from existence. Maya knew the fleet was coming. Her scouts had tracked its movement for weeks. She had time to prepare, but she also knew that no preparation would be enough. The Vexery fleet was too powerful. They could not defeat it in direct combat, so she did not try. Instead, she spread her forces across 100 hiding places. When the Vexery fleet arrived at the station, they found it empty. The humans and their allies had vanished like ghosts. The Vexery commanders were confused, then angry. They had gathered enough firepower to destroy a civilization, and their enemies had simply disappeared. While the fleet searched for rebels who were not there, Maya executed the final phase of her plan. Simultaneous attacks struck 12 critical Vexery systems at exactly the same moment. Power stations that supplied energy to military bases were destroyed. Communication networks that connected the Dominion were severed. Supply lines that fed Vexery armies were cut. The Great Fleet, the largest in Vexery history, suddenly found itself stranded and isolated. Their communications were down. Their supply ships never arrived. Their orders from home never came. And all around them, in the darkness of space, rebel forces gathered. The final battle was not one battle but 100. Across the Dominion, species that had been slaves for generations rose up together. They fought with human weapons, human tactics, and human determination. They faced enemies who had oppressed them for millennia and discovered that those enemies could bleed and die like anyone else. The Vexery fought back with everything they had. Their warriors were still strong, their technology still advanced, but they were fighting an enemy that refused to surrender, refused to retreat, refused to accept that defeat was possible. They were fighting humans, and the species that had learned from humans, and the spirit of rebellion that humans had awakened. It took 5 years. 5 years of war, of sacrifice, of losses that could never be counted. But in the end, the Dominion fell. The Vexery High Council surrendered, their empire shattered, their military destroyed. A new galactic government was formed, one that included representatives from every freed species, human and alien alike. Maya Chen stood before the Assembly of Free Worlds on the day the new government was declared. She was older now, scarred by years of war, tired in ways that rest could never heal, but her eyes still held that same fire that had burned on the day she woke up in a Vexery prison cell. "We came to this region of space by accident," she told the assembled representatives. Our ship drifted into Vexery territory, and they thought we were nothing. They looked at our soft bodies and our primitive technology and saw weakness. They thought they were adding slaves to their empire. She paused and looked around the room at the dozens of species that had fought beside humanity, friends and allies who had become family. They were wrong. Humans are not weak. We are not easily conquered. We carry within us a spark that refuses to die, no matter how hard anyone tries to extinguish it. And now that spark has spread to all of you. The Vexery learned too late what happens when you underestimate the will of beings who believe in freedom. She raised her hand in a salute that humans had used for centuries. We drifted into their dominion, and they hardly noticed our might. Now they will never forget it, and neither will the galaxy. The assembly erupted in cheers. Across 1,000 worlds, beings who had once been slaves celebrated their freedom, and among them, 12,000 humans who had left Earth centuries ago finally found the home they had been searching for. Not a planet, but a family of species united by struggle and hope. The universe would never underestimate them again.